Little lag time, little lag time. Ah, there it is. All right, so the purpose of this presentation is to talk about the most important tool for geographers, and that is maps. Maps and more maps. And we're going to talk a little bit about the kinds of maps that you might be looking at in this class. Um, so let's get started. So geographers, of course, they love their maps, but not all maps are made equally as important. And I love this. Just watch how many times I have to move my face to get it out of the way of all of the stuff that I want to talk about. So there are general types of maps. There are physical maps that have basically just natural features, mountains, rivers. Weather maps are physical maps. Political maps mostly are the maps that you will see outlined with the shapes of countries and the names of countries and maybe the names of capitals of countries and so on and so forth. Reference maps are tools for people to find things. So a road map would be a political map. Sometimes a road map would actually even have like physical features on it. And these are useful for navigation from getting to one place from one place to another. Thematic maps are where it's at, though, because these maps focus on communicating complex geographic data. So they tend to focus on like a single phenomenon, and they show you where that phenomenon is most relevant. And then you, as a budding geographer, will be able to draw some conclusions about a place based on these certain characteristics that are identified through thematic maps. And they're the fun maps. So let's talk a little bit about what these are, because it's hard to really understand them without a picture because they are a map. So this is a physical map, and as you can see, we have the Rocky Mountains outlined here, the Appalachian Mountains, and some different regions here in the United States, some physical regions here in the United States. And then this would be a political map. So you can see a political map has the names of all the states and then the states' capitals. And we are going to do a United States map quiz at some point during this course because it's important that you know the place where you live. Some maps, like this one here, are combinations of both political and physical maps, and these are actually really helpful, particularly if you are driving, and we'll talk about GIS and GPS a little bit later, but if you're on a road trip, it's kind of important and relevant to know when you're going to be driving through the mountains. As my husband would say, he likes to drive because he thinks I drive crazily through the mountains, and he might be right because I think it's kind of fun to go fast around sharp turns, but don't judge me. Okay, reference maps, again, these are the maps that are used for reference. So you have political landforms, political boundaries, historical locations. Just anytime you kind of want some information about, like just general information about a place as a whole, this is the map that you might look at. So this is a road map down here, and this is just a general political map. So if I was asking you, for example, to tell me where is India in relation to China, you'd be looking at a reference map to answer that question. So it helps you answer questions. And these are my favorites. So the purpose of a thematic map, again, is to communicate complex geographic data for analysis. Like these are fun to look at, and they're even fun to make. And if we were in school together, you guys would be making one of these. So like geography, like you got to color, and that's what we do. We color maps from time to time. And so we won't really be doing that, but we will definitely be analyzing these to help identify geographic patterns. So we might be looking in our development unit as at where the wealthier versus the poorer countries are, or even like counties. Like you might look at a map, a thematic map that talks about wealth inequality in this country. And then depending on the kind of map that you look at, you're going to identify certain areas of the United States that are going to be richer versus poor. You could do this even locally. Like we could look at the Chicagoland area, and we could look at like from Elgin to Plainfield, St. Charles, up north where I live in Huntley, and you can kind of compare and contrast a variety of different things. In this case, I'm talking about wealth. We could look at where religions are practices. You can look at, ironically, I think I might have mentioned this to you before, but COVID and the coronavirus outbreak has made geography incredibly relevant these days. And so particularly as we're talking about the origin and the spread and so on and so forth. And there's maps online all the time showing how the virus is increasing and decreasing and where. So the types of maps that you have to know are dot density, graduated symbol, choropleth, isoline, and cartogram. So I'm going to show you those real quick, and you can decide which one you like the best. I'll tell you which one I like the best at the end of the presentation. Or maybe I'll tell you while I'm looking at the map because I get so excited. Okay, so this is a dot density map. And a dot density map, there's a couple of key things that you have to know about a dot density map. First, the dots are all the same size, and you can see that on this map right here on the U.S. Public Libraries map. I'm going to keep moving myself. And then the way in which you read this map is the closer together, the more clustered the dots are together, the higher the frequency of whatever it is that you're studying. And on the map example on the screen right now, that's U.S. Public Libraries. So if I were to ask you, okay, identify the patterns, where are you seeing the majority of public libraries here in the United States? And I think it's pretty easy to tell that you're looking over here on the East Coast, right, and New England in particular, and then you see some clustered here in this area and this area and this area and this area. And then if we were in class, I would ask you this question. So I'm going to ask it for you, and then I'm going to put it in the Edpuzzle as well. Why? Why do you think, and as you're looking at the patterns here, what's the correlation? Why are you seeing the clusters of public libraries where you are seeing them? What might help explain that phenomenon? I'll tell you later. Okay, this is a graduated symbol. Do not be confused. A graduated symbol could use circles or dots as well, but they don't have to. They just use a symbol of some kind. The larger the symbol, in this particular case, Facebook users per state, I get it. It's an old people social media platform. I'm on it. I know you guys are all on your Insta, Twitter, Snapchat. Well, I don't even know what you guys use. So maybe I'll put that, I'll add that question to the Edpuzzle as well, because I always want to know the new technology. But in this particular case, it's Facebook users per state. So as you are looking at this, again, the larger the symbol, the more Facebook users per state. So you can see California and Texas and New York and Illinois and Ohio and Georgia and Florida. So you can kind of take a look at and then you got the Dakotas with a tiny little dot. So not as many Facebook users there. And I could ask you the same question. Why? What helps explain this phenomenon? There's actually some correlation between those last two maps, to be honest. All right, this, I just can't wait to tell you. This is my favorite map. This is a choropleth map. And choropleth maps are probably the one that you're going to see the most frequently. This is Chicagoland community areas per capita income. So per capita income means wealth. So what you're looking at here is the wealth of the Chicagoland area, which is outlined in red. So this is the border of Chicago, right? And then Chicagoland goes up this way. So a choropleth map can be read like this. Every shade of the color indicates value. And typically, what you're seeing on a choropleth map, and it doesn't always have to be the same color. I think shade is probably more important when you're looking at a choropleth map. The darker the shade, the higher the value. So in this particular case, the darkest green on the map indicates the wealthiest areas. And then again, you would look at this to identify patterns. So you might already know this, but the west and the south side of Chicago tends to be the least wealthy, and the North Shore and the northern part of Chicago tends to be the most wealthy. And this map supports that conclusion if you already kind of went into this slide knowing that to be true about Chicago. Here's another choropleth map, and it's an election year, so we're going to look at this map, especially as we get closer to the election. So I just grabbed this. I didn't even care what year, because we're in an election year, so it doesn't matter. But red equals Republican, blue equals Democratic states. And so it's a choropleth map that's not the same color, but it still gives you a great deal of information about patterns, like who's voting, mostly Republican. Where do we see most of the Democratic votes? This really hasn't changed that much. Although I can tell you for sure that this is not a map of the 2016 election, because Trump won Wisconsin and Ohio back then. So this is probably 2012. And we have two more. So this is an isoline map, and an isoline map is your stereotypical weather map. So anytime you're watching the weather on TV and you see this map, it is an isoline map. And the way in which you read this is that the lines actually, you can see me my cursor is over here. These lines and the colors within this line represent equal, similar values, right? So, go back, too excited. So this area of the United States, for example, is we're talking about climate, probably winter. The average annual temperature up here is somewhere between 20 and 30 degrees. For us, it's somewhere between 30 and 40 degrees. And so these are not choropleth maps. So if they're, because a choropleth map is all about gradation of color, and even if there's gradation of color here, it's all about the lines. And then last but not least are the weirdest of all of the thematic maps. This is a cartogram. This is a sad map too, because this shows child labor. Now, the way that you read this map is, and this is the most unique, anytime you see a country that doesn't look right, like it's blown up or exaggerated, that means it has a higher value. If the country essentially disappears, that means that it has the least. And in this case, we're looking at child labor. So if you were to look at this map and I were to ask you a question like, regionally speaking, which area of the world has the largest amount of child labor, you would not be wrong to say either Asia or Africa. Both of those answers would be correct. And then just to draw your attention to, say, Europe and the United States, like, I'd like to say that there's no child labor here, but it's not accurate, especially when you compare, well, I don't know, you guys tell me, where did Canada go? It's gone. Why is it gone? Because they have very, very, very little amounts of child labor. That cannot be said for the United States because you can still see us pretty clearly. And that is all for the kinds of maps that you need to know. Now, this may take a while to stop because it's like sometimes the little thing, that was quick. All right.